City Council meeting for the City of Mount Vernon to order. And the first item on the agenda, we've got an aggressive agenda. We've got a lot to obviously celebrate on the agenda. So let's get right to it with agenda additions to agenda approval. That's been sent out, it's been posted. Anybody have anything to add to it or ready to approve the agenda?
I will move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Steph. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Scott? Deb, can you hear us okay? Can you hear us okay? Okay, good. Motion on the floor to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On the communication section, first of all, any unscheduled comments? Is there anybody here from the public here to address anything that's not on the agenda that we're not going to get to until we get to the commendations? Anybody? Okay. We'll move on to the commendations. This is the part of celebration of life here, if you will. I want to begin the commendations for the February 18th, 2022 emergency event by introducing Chief Shannon to begin the process here, and he'll go through how we're going to handle this. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. I took the honor and privilege to bring this large attended meeting together, knowing that I work with some pretty amazing people. And I want to read to you the letter that we were presenting in the Sheriff's Office, and we responded to a critical incident on February 18th. Approximately 9:32 hours, the Lake County Sheriff's Office received a report of a grain bin accident with multiple persons trapped in corn at a farm on Highway 1 north of Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon-Lisbon Police Officer Jeff Frankfurt and Lake County Sheriff's deputies responded to the scene. Mount Vernon Fire Department, Lisbon Fire Department, Martell Fire Department, and Lisbon Mount Vernon area and Mount Vernon Ambulance Service were dispatched to respond to this incident as well. Officer Frankfurt was the first emergency responder on scene. And upon his arrival, I've got a photo up behind you to kind of give you a little context of what we were responding to. I will tell you that talking to many of the people here that responded to this incident, none of them have, they're all very humble about their response. This is one of the largest scale events I've seen, with the largest attending, the number of responders that responded to an incident from this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this briefly. We're just going to do short photos to kind of show you. This is a few minutes after the original call came in. The officer responded from town. It's approximately 4 miles north of town. So probably maybe 5 minutes post call for the 911 service when the incident occurred. Officer Frankfurt arrived, and citizens who had witnessed this event occur had stopped and to assist, and also became stuck in the corn while attempting to rescue the submerged men. Officer Frankfurt immediately climbed into the corn pile to assist the rescue. Upon fire department arrival, Officer Frankfurt and firefighters worked to place a barricade to reduce the continued flow of corn from the grain bin, while others continued to attempt to uncover and extract those who were submerged and trapped in the corn. As additional responders arrived to assist, responders immediately began medically assessing 2 men who were first to be trapped and confirmed that they were both still alive. Here's a photo of where they are. The person on the left, you see I've got their faces blacked out because I haven't talked to anybody for that purpose, but you can see he's already buried chest deep into the corn, where the other 2 persons whose faces are blacked out there's a person laying underneath the corn vertically in that position as well, as for everybody's context of where they're at. So this is truly a critical incident from that standpoint. Definitely a life-threatening situation for where we're at. Responders strenuously worked to remove corn away from their face using only their hands, the tools that they had at the time, trying to find different barricades and things. The 2 people who came to assist, like I said, got caught in the corn, and they were able to be removed first so that we could get devices in place to deal with that. Rescuers then began to concentrate their effort on the 2 men who remained trapped in the corn and were the most dangerous of suffocation. The most vulnerable victim remained trapped in his left side, almost completely buried in the corn, with only his right arm exposed, which is probably what you're seeing there. At approximately 10:06 hours, so we're almost 34 minutes into this incident, after being trapped for nearly 35 minutes, the 3rd victim was pulled from the corn, rushed to an ambulance. Responders continued to work with the submerged victim. After blocking the flow of corn and exposing the victim's face, an oxygen mask was initially placed on the man to help maintain his airway. It was quickly determined that a better option to maintain the man's airway would be to replace the oxygen mask with a full mask SCBA, just like the firefighters wear at a critical incident. It's going to cover their entire face, allow them to breathe through their apparatus, and Chief Goodlove may speak a little bit more about that as well. The use of the SCBA was a full-scale shield, provided a crucial part of the rescue, and it more easily allowed him to maintain his ability to breathe during the rescue operation, and most importantly, kept the ever-flowing corn out of his face. I will tell you from watching the video when it was going, you can imagine the corn flowing out. It's like quick, it just keeps coming as you're going through it. So the rescue was critical, it was in depth. In an attempt to help him avoid panic, he was reassured repeatedly. Emergency personnel were actively digging him out of the corn. And this event escalated to enough. Chief Bourne, I think it was Assistant Chief Bourne, was running command on our side of things. Immediately called for our city crews to come to the scene. You see their big loader in the background. The backhoe, there was DOT brought resources to that to help spread that corn out. There is an unbelievable amount of corn that they dealt with. With the arrival of the public works employee, DOT staff, the unloaders, the skid loaders, farmers were bringing skid loaders over to assist. A vacuum truck. The corn was quickly removed from around the man. He was pulled from the corn in approximately 10:45 hours, 75 minutes after being buried in the corn. From that standpoint, after being successfully extricated, the man who had been most severely trapped in the corn was transported by ambulance to the local hospital for what was determined to be non-life injuries. 3 other men were assessed by medical personnel at the scene and released. To me, that is an amazing feat that we had this number of responders. We have an incident going on for over 75 minutes, and we have zero loss of life. And that's amazing from that standpoint. If it was not, and so that's what we're here tonight for, is to recognize the people involved. And I remind everybody in this context, the room is packed, but I also want to remind you, this is just Mount Vernon's portion of that response. It's not Lisbon's and Silt and Martell's and everybody else. So the scene was assisted by everybody from that standpoint. So we're going to present commendations. Chief Goodlove, you get in?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
So, just to give these gentlemen accolades too, we got a chance to do it anytime we can do that in a good nature. I think it's very, very important valid. We start training with new individuals on the fire department. We put them in all kinds of different training evolutions, trying to recreate the dynamic fire grounds or emergency scenes that we arrive on. And there's nothing that in my career, or anyone else's career, that you can really plan for every single one individual call that we go on. The training and the commitment that these young men have been through, the hours of training on different facets of the fire service, really, I think, led to the successful outcome of this, and just drawing from different entities there of instances that we put in there. So I want to give them a tremendous amount of accolades. It just goes to show that, talk about when we train in the fire ground, life safety is our #1 priority when we go to any emergency scene. So when we arrive on scene in a fire, EMS call a vehicle accident, our #1 priority is those patients that are there. And these gentlemen all stepped up to the plate there, knowing that this was it was truly what we call in fire service a high risk, low frequency call, where there's things that we call the spidey senses start going off in the back of our heads, going, okay, we know this isn't our bread and butter that we do every day or train for. So you guys showed a lot of fortitude and ingenuity on the things that took place to provide that successful outcome. And while I've got the podium for a minute too, I want to really give props to the public works guys that dropped everything. And a phone call from Derek to those guys, and there was a fleet of city vehicles coming our way, so they knew we were in need there. So that it was just great from a standpoint after the fact of hearing all the different entities that came together to provide that successful outcome. So with that, like I said, hats off to everybody that was there and helped out with that. So.
Lee County Sheriff's deputies, Mount Vernon Fire Department, Lisbon Fire Department, Public Works employees of Lisbon and Mount Vernon, along with numerous emergency responders from several other agencies working the scene. It is very likely the man most severely trapped would not have survived this incident. Because of their actions in this incident, I'm awarding Officer Jeff Frankfurt with the Life-Saving Commendation Award for the act of saving a life in February 18, 2002. Continuing with that same statement, I will ask Assistant Chief Derek Warren, Fire Captain Meredith Zarkar, Firefighter James Casey, Firefighter Tim Keegan, Firefighter Mark Crowe, Firefighter Todd Weaver, Firefighter Cliff Weaver, and Firefighter Pete Weber up front. Stay in order. This is the Mount Vernon Fire Team that was responding to this incident and also is being commended for their life-saving efforts.
Already done with the group picture there? We'll do individual ones here. We're going to start with
Feel free to come up when you want to.
Before Chief transitions to the next group, I would be remiss if I did not mention the timing of an article on the front page of the Cedar Rapids Gazette just recently about small towns and not having enough emergency and fire response teams on a small town basis. How lucky is Mount Vernon to have not only a well-trained with very incredible guidance from the chief and assistant chief here, but also have a large number of volunteers that can step up and come out in instances like this. So I think the timing of that was very interesting. So I had to include that in the fire recognition there, guys.
For the Public Works sector, we'll bring up Eldon Downs, our Public Safety Director, Matt Potts, Dean Smith, and I think Donnie Fedderson is absent, is that right? Tonight, and then Dustin Burnett.
Picture.
Again, the same accolades. When you think about emergency response and life-saving efforts, the rest of us trained for that. These guys generally did not train for the emergency response from that, but they stepped up, brought the equipment that was needed for this rescue, and provided a vital portion of that rescue. So thank you guys. So again, one more round of everybody that's involved in this incident. Fortunately, we do have guests that would like to say a few words as well. One of the two rescue parties, both here. Oh, there you go. Very good. Would like to say a few words as well. Come on.
And for the record, just introduce yourself and efforts, please, Alan.
I'm Alan Molly, 1553 Highway 1 North Mount Vernon. Where the grain bin incident happened was my property. And I'd like to do a math lesson. Everybody, this is going to be educational. It'll be brief though. You all get an A+. I'll give you the score right away. 50,000 bushel times 56 pounds of bushel on the average. Take that and divide it, and you end up with 1,400 ton, which was inside that bin that came out full force, just like an avalanche on a mountain. The community was more powerful than that. Think about it. Thank you.
Introduce yourself and efforts, please.
Sure. I'm Sean Lambertson from Martell. It was our corn. Jared is here tonight. Jared works with us. And I just had a couple quick things I wanted to say. We're going to try to be with the fire department here next week, because you guys have, or first of the month, because you have your meeting. But there were a few things that really struck us. I was in a unique spot. I was in it. I was stuck. And I had nothing to do but watch what was going on after the 911 call went out. Being a man of faith, you wonder, you can't help but wonder. I could never help but wonder, but that day I could see God's fingerprints all over what was happening. I'm shaking, having looked at the pictures. Sorry about that. But I just can't get over the number of things that were way beyond probability that happened. And I want to thank everybody for that. Whether it was, I don't know what to attribute to that, but there were things that the people that arrived between the 911 call and you folks, the circumstances that put them with us at that time, started with things not working correctly within 2 days in advance that put them there at the right place at the right time. So all I know is that we got some miracles, and we thank every one of you for that, and we thank God for that, and my family thanks you. We just can't say that enough. Another thing that really struck me, I watched two people we know helping Jared, and I can't tell you what that meant to me. And I also know that a man that I knew from Martell was holding my hand. And he looked at me and told me everything was going to be okay. So to those of you who are volunteers, I cannot tell you what it means to see a face that you know. Because I don't think I would have believed it from anybody else. I was really having doubts. But please do not ever underestimate the value of community people responding and working together like that. The value of that was priceless. I apparently lost consciousness shortly after somebody told me it was all going to be okay. The other thing that I saw from my standpoint was people that I knew from almost every community fire department that was there. Recognized faces from Lisbon, from Vernon, of course Martell, which is my home, recognized faces from Mechanicsville, recognized faces from Anamosa. And those communities fight like the victims on the ball field, and they should. But there wasn't anything but pure cooperation that day. And I got to watch that. So there are several things I can't unsee, but that is something else that I can't unsee. And you guys should all really know how special that is. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Molly and Mr. Lambert there. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak towards this commendation? Sure.
Jerry, that's my name. I'm from Lisbon. Sorry. I was the guy who saved that day. I didn't think I was going to get this emotional again, having been a month, but it's just amazing. You guys all volunteered for this position, and it takes a special person to do that. And from the bottom of my heart, my wife and my family, thank you for getting me back home to my three boys and my wife. I didn't know I was going to come up here and say anything, so I didn't have my bells, but just thank you. And I hope to see you guys all, in town and out and about. So, thank you. Supporters, thank you.
We're all glad to hear Mr. Youngblood, Mr. Emerson, Mr. Molly.
Yeah, I gotta say a couple things in here too, guys. So, Derek Warren, I'm the Assistant Fire Chief from Mount Vernon here. And I just want to echo again how thankful I was and how much more relief I felt when we showed up and everybody else came along with me. I knew the people that were coming. When I called Eldon on the phone, and after he kind of looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "I need the end loader and I need it now." And he finally, "Oh, yes, yeah, we'll be on the way." So to know that a phone call, I could grab on the radio and got all these people and more, and a couple phone calls from people to get farmers with trucks and tractors and skid loaders, and everybody came up to me there, "What do you need? What do you need?" And just to be able to delegate that and know that stuff was coming was amazing. And I appreciate the small town we live in, and it's just amazing to see everybody out here, and just thank you all so much for coming out.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Warren. So, open mic here, we have a few more minutes. Anybody else need to speak, would like to speak to this? This commendation. I'll make sure everybody has adequate time, adequate chance. Hearing none, I think we're ready to move on with the agenda, but I think everything that needs to be said has already been said by somebody at this point, so. Chief, anything else?
Thank you all. Like I said, this truly was an amazing response. Know from the emergency responders perspective as well, that your words mean a ton to us as well, coming through. You are why we do what we do. This is the definition of community and why we help each other out all the time. So when something goes critical, I love the reference to the sports, because this happened to be state wrestling when this was going on. So there's a few people on the top of that, different aspects, but everybody came to this, and it truly took an army to get the outcome we got, but we won. So appreciate it.
Chief, you shared the verbiage with the son already?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you all for coming tonight. on here, I guess. So let's go on to the consent agenda. We've got 2 items on the consent agenda. City Council minutes and liquor license. Is there-
I didn't figure too worried.
Yeah, first, I'll second. Yes, that. Yeah, it's Roger. It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Motion opposed? Motion carries. There's no public hearings tonight or ordinance approvals. We're off to resolutions. 3-21-2022A. Local facility owned property, historic preservation, and add the address or something.
No, other than I would only point out that HPC, the computer is so old that they would like to investigate that. I didn't have a problem with it, I just want to make sure the council is good with us. The desk is pre-1960s.
Needs to have city council action.
Correct. Yeah.
Dollar value, whatever.
Well, I mean, unless there's further conversation, I move approval of resolution 3-21-2022A, approving the disposal of municipal property.
I'll second that. Scott and Craig, approve the second. We're ready to vote on the motion. All in favor of approving the motion to dispose of city-owned property, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Ferlin,
Yes.
Eagle,
Yes. Sorry to embarrass all city council members there with my ignorance.
I appreciate the eagerness.
Now I think we're ready to move on to resolution 3-21-2022B. Authorizing the city of Melbourne to participate in the Resilient Iowa Communities Program. Want to start about that, Chris?
So this is one of basically 2 projects that came out of our meeting with Green AmeriCorps. And in partnership with the University of Northern Iowa, they will basically come in and initiate a study. And for the most part, it's environmental and kind of our footprint sustainability. So it falls in line with a number of your goals and objectives. The cost is relatively inexpensive. I think it's only a couple $1,000. So it offers exposure to the University of Northern Iowa as well as the state of Mount Vernon with the outcomes. I don't know if I can add much to
Does it focus on like community, like city-owned property, or is it community?
So it can be tailored in either direction. I think we have the ability, I want to say in Victoria, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, they did tailor theirs towards city-owned facilities. They are bigger than us, so we could expand upon this. I won't know fully until we meet with representatives of the University of Northern Iowa, but yeah, city facilities would be number 1, and then community-wide would be number 2, whether or not we can continue to look at city facilities, school facilities, Cornell, and then kind of the broader spectrum from there.
On page 14, Chris, it says under number 1, appoints blank to serve as the city's Resilient Iowa Community Coordinator. Has that person already been considered, or does this have to be approved before that?
So, no, it hasn't. It depends on whether or not you want to relinquish that authority to the Sustainability Committee, or if you want somebody from my staff to act as that coordinator. If you did, then it would be Laura.
Do you have a recommendation on that?
You know, for continuity purposes, I like to keep it in a staff level, just because I know I can keep track of it easier when I can a volunteer group. Unless one of the council members wants to take that role, completely up to you.
I would defer to Chris's recommendation to keep the continuity of Laura. It's my experience that it's a benefit in working with these types of projects. I'd also like to thank Chris for bringing this forward. Anytime we can work with our universities on projects such as this, it's a plus, so.
Well, I'd love to take credit, but the mayor is the one that initiated.
Well, thank you.
Green American and so.
And I realize that I'm thinking you down the road, this is a project of mine, number one. Number two, though, I also recognize it takes more effort from the city, from Chris, Laura especially so far, and that, you know, she's going to be the point person on this, that it takes some effort, and it takes some buy-in from other council members who are voting on this. The third thing, I think it's an investment in Mount Vernon that we've had other examples along this line. I mean, Peace City, USA, costs us $100 a month, $100 a year, I should say. But it's like Trees Forever, or the Main Street CDG connections that we have, the Monarch program with the butterfly and being sustainable there, kind of cool Gloria, things like that. Those are the types of things that don't cost us a lot, but it gives us a creative distinction among the other 900 small towns in the state of Iowa that I think helps keep Mount Vernon, will cut it up. So
It helps shape the culture of the community.
and it's derived from the citizens. I mean, you know, no one's saying we need to drop this program, that program, whatever. There's endorsement for all of these programs. So it's within our culture, it's within our DNA to invest in things like this. So I'll stop talking and let the council discuss this resolution.
With that, I move Resolution 3-21-2022B, authorizing the City of Mount Vernon to participate in the Resilient Iowa Communities Program.
I will second.
Thank you, Steph. Any further discussion? If we're ready to vote, this time I'll turn it over to Sue.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Laura, for continuing this project. I think we're to motions for approval, starting with the claims list, the last one that was presented. Any questions on that list?
I move approval of the claims list.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Hearing no questions, we're ready to vote on the claims list. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Placeholder item on COVID-related issues and policies. Chris, you've got the latest data here, 0.29.
Actually, it was down to, I want to say about 0.15 this afternoon. I'll be anxious to see how towards the end of this week after spring break, usually we see a little influx, but I think one of the, I don't want to call it concerning, I'm not a doctor,
But you did stay on holiday.
but I am questioning whether, from a reporting standpoint, how many are getting reported, tested, and seeing a lack of, I don't even know. I just see fewer and fewer people getting tested, or they're taking at-home tests that don't have to necessarily be reported. So whether that number is truly 0.15 or not, that's what is according to the county at this point.
Make a good point about people coming back from spring break. Next week is spring break, plus the latest variant, who knows what's going to happen with that. But I think we should keep it as an agenda item. Is anybody that thinks that we need to move on from any action on this item at this point, other than your other agenda? And we'll keep it there and move on to number 3. Special consideration of quarry pond cleanup proposal, year 2. Eldon, or who's going to take it?
Actually, so there were 2 pictures that were included in there. I just wanted to be able to show you that the products that we are putting in there are working. We would like to introduce an aeration system that uses a windmill as well this year. But bottom line is, yes, it's expensive at $17,516.18 per year. Our goal is, once we go through 2 or 3 years of pain, that we can just manage from that point. But the truth of the matter is that we're taking another look at Nature's Park. We have some ground on the other side of the small stream. We now have the perspective of being able to look at Nature Park and all of the surrounding areas kind of collectively, going this route, we've started, we might as well finish. So that was really, like I said, I wanted to be able to show you that the product is actually working, and it's expensive, but it's doing its job.
I'm all for making sure that Nature Park is kept up and keep going with this. Just two questions. One is that I noticed at Lake McBride, they have a big project going on removing silt, which is, of course, part of what's sucking the oxygen out of the water within that. At some point, do you think we're going to have to get some of that silt out of there, but you can throw $17,500 for the chemicals in every year?
So the good news is our issue on the quarry is not silt. Our issue is vegetation, debris that is
Coming off the trees and
coming
stuff?
off. So the bacteria that we're introducing is actually feeding on that material. We have done some tree removal, not specifically because of the quarry, we've done that to make a trail connection, but we will have to look at the exterior of the quarry in the future at some point and look at some of the, I'll call them volunteer, kind of invasive tree species. Try to leave all of the old growth, but really there isn't a area of silt that's feeding it per se. It's just all of that vegetation coming in and just having nowhere to go.
So is the $17,500 just part of our regular budget then, since it's something that's ongoing year after year?
It has been. It's been supplemented with other dollars, but it's part of the regular budget, yes.
Good.
So I'd like to add a little bit to that. It kind of just went untreated for so long that we then had a problem. The decaying matter, the algae, leaves falling in from trees, and that sort of thing just falls to the bottom and it sits there. And it then shallows up the pond, which then creates some fish kills that we've had, hard freezes throughout the winter. If you will, the bacteria, it's not really a chemical, but the bacteria is essentially bugs, and it's eating that stuff up as it would, like, say, in a sanitary sewer plant. It digests all that stuff and decays it. Adding aeration to the pond will expedite that process a little bit quicker, so we can gain the depth back. The oxygen is fruitful for the aquatic life. That brings that back into play. So it's kind of it's an ongoing snowball effect, but at some point here, I don't think in the too far future, like Chris said, we're just going to be able to manage the aeration and maybe possibly some dye, possibly, which would be a little lack of words here.
Like a lower
investment to then just keep things stable, yes.
So the idea, if I'm hearing this correctly, isn't to spend $17,000 a year. It's to effectively shock it to undo years of neglect and then get to a more maintenance standpoint.
Yeah, I want to, because I hate to use the word necessarily neglect. It's not like Parks and Rec.
When I say this, having been on Parks and Rec for 6 years, so I'm putting myself into the wall.
I think there's been some confusion on what DNR would allow us to do and what they wouldn't allow us to do. They provide some of the fish that is in there, and then they help with the management. So they initially told us that we couldn't do anything of this nature, and then they kind of backtrack on that a little bit. So it's been a back and forth game to a certain extent. But I think, generally speaking, now that we have a public works site in the area off of Business 30 and First is going to be moved back into the fold. We're going to move all of that waste site off to Bryant Road. Collectively, I think we need to look at that entire area, and I know that Parks and Rec has discussed the potential of putting a proposal in front of the council to look at that, hiring a firm to come in and just put an overall picture of that entire area together. And this becomes a vital part. I'm gonna put my plug in, I wish people would stop putting their goldfish in there. But, other than that, like I said, I think it's a true amenity that is, from the perspective of being in court, it's not going anywhere, so we might as well take advantage of the fact that it's there and treat it as an amenity.
I'd like to see it used more, not less.
Correct. Except for the kids that are on there in the winter time, please don't.
Safely, use safely.
Yes.
I think it's a very unique feature of our community, and I've always found it a worthy investment.
What action do you want to take on this?
I would, what are we on, B?
3.
J.
Somebody, yeah.
J3.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. Okay. I would move approval of moving forward with year 2 of the quarter cleanup proposal for the quoted 17,000 and change.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
second.
Yeah, I'll second.
You did the bid. Sorry about that, Scott.
That's fine.
Moved and seconded to approve the year 2 Quarry Pond cleanup proposal. Hearing no other questions of Eldon or anybody? Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I apologize, one quick follow-up on that. We're talking about the aeration system. Is there a plan, or is that being formulated, what that would take?
Formulated, so we started looking at options, but I think what we've settled on is a windmill-based unit. But that will be back in front of you because the cost will likely be something that you would go with it. Off of the island, I think is where we were looking, trying to keep people away from it.
I don't know if we'll be able to get it out the island, but the idea, I was actually looking into it today a little bit more. They have what they call a uni-pole, so it's instead of your traditional 4-legged windmill that you would normally see like on a farm, they're just like a flagpole, basically telescopic, and it folds down, so then the airline would come down through the mast, and then so it's kind of tamper-proof as far as. My big thing was I didn't want people climbing on it and getting hurt or damaging things, that sort of thing, so.
Or
That's kind of-
Chris's point, or Chris's point about people going out in the winter, and giving people something interesting out there to go explore.
I would say the police have portable cameras.
I was envisioning a bubbler, like a fountain, seriously, like a ping pong and
That's
stuff.
what I was thinking too.
There's a diffuser that you put in the water, and so that air pushes through the line, and then it then goes out there and pushes out through really small bubbles. But the problem with that is that we need a base for that model, and it would be much easier to do on the bank somewhere on the outside of the pond.
What he's saying is I don't like it when it's on.
Good discussion on that item. Moving to J4, discussion consideration of public works pay adjustment. Operator 2 to operator 3.
So I have the flexibility when we make hires to bring them in as a labor operator 1, 2, or 3. We can only glean so much, obviously, off of somebody's resume and through the interview process. So we brought Dustin in as an operator 2, and I would be remiss to say that we could have brought him in as an operator 3. So he's exceeded expectations from not only a work ethic standpoint, but just the knowledge. Been beyond pleased with the effort that we're getting, and I get reminded every day from individuals that don't know that I stole one of the best employees. So, I do that willingly. And happy to say that we did that. But this is an easy one for me to make that jump.
Anything to add?
And Dustin is here, I guess. everybody-
Oh, no pressure on
Right,
that.
It's like when we promoted Laura, that gave her something, right?
I would move approval of the public works pay adjustment.
You can still talk.
I was gonna turn it down, that's all right.
I second
The
that.
motion and now second on the floor.
Unless Matt wants to say something.
Oh, I just
It's about the-
I can't go meeting without saying it, right?
You gotta be quicker, dude.
I'm sorry. So, no, firsthand, I've seen Dustin operate at our facility and handle a lot of problems that were done on other people, and this recommendation, I can fully support it, so I'll let you know he's done a phenomenal job, so, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sargent. It's got a motion on the floor, it's been approved, and we're ready to vote on it. Is there any other questions? You got a motion and a second?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And on J5, discussion consideration of site plan approval for the Mount Vernon Community School District Athletic Complex. Council action is needed. I think we've got some information. We also got an email today, I think, from a resident out there, architect from Shai Patterson, about that as well. So, who wants to start?
I think real quick, just to talk about the email that we received today. I think everybody is privy to traffic circulation problems in the area. And really the letter was more or less hoping that the city would push the issue to the table, which it has. There is a meeting scheduled on Wednesday in which we'll talk about circulation patterns, not only from the community school district, but also Cornell. The three entities are kind of all in this together. We all have stakes in the ground over there, or reasons to be on the table. So I do believe that the concerns addressed in that email today are actually, I don't want to say less to do with this athletic complex, but more to do with the entirety of not only the complex, but the land area around there. And again, I think that the conversation that we're going to have on Wednesday, I feel fairly confident that we can make some headway in that regard. As to the site plan, Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation was to approve based upon meeting Dave Sheckender's with B&K's 11 points? 12 points. Looking through those points, I didn't see anything that was really earth-shattering that was going to add to the budget of the athletic complex or be something that they would be able to address. And then we have received the lighting plan, but it was late this afternoon. I've already informed Greg that my plan is to recommend to you that you table this item for 2 weeks. Give us the opportunity to have a meeting on Wednesday, and then give us an opportunity. I would like the opportunity to review the lighting schedule a little bit more in depth. I will say, out of all of the concerns that I've heard so far from citizens, it always goes back to lighting and stormwater. I think those are fresh in everybody's mind, especially those who live in Stonebrook. So, with that, I'll entertain any questions. I know Lauren and Greg are here to speak on behalf of the school district.
Superintendent Horse, Mr. Hoffman. Welcome. Just stick with the
The sugar green.
Well, obviously, this is trivial compared to the beginning of the meeting, but thank you for hearing us out tonight in regards to our proposed Mustang Activities Complex. And I just want to give you a little bit of background, and then Lauren Hoffman from Hall & Engineering will be more than glad to give you some more information and answer questions as best we can. As an esteemed city manager in eastern Iowa, in a community located fairly close to Lisbon, off top of the sedge, as a community, you're either growing or you're dying. And we think the same as the school district and the Mount Vernon, the Mustang Activities Complex, we see as the next logical growth spot and need from a facilities perspective in the district. I have a 5-year perspective as a superintendent. Oh, by the way, I was going to say earlier, my wife loves the quarry, so whatever you can do, keep that on your agenda. But I have my 5-year perspective, and in our 5 years here as residents of Mount Vernon, we've seen the bypass come into play, we've seen the Russell Science Center at Cornell, you've seen the Cornell Sports facility that's going up now, obviously the crown jewel, the LBC. In our our school district, you've seen the Performing Arts Center, tennis courts, softball complex, numerous improvements internally, and you've seen the housing subdivisions coming up. So there's a ton of great growth going on in Mount Vernon in general, and we see the activities complex as the next big piece of the puzzle in the community. One of the first things I was charged with doing when taking the job was to put together a 20-year facilities vision. And I spent a ton of time walking around the campus, walking around the buildings, and also walking around the community, because one of the burning questions I had to answer my very first month here was, where are we going to play football? We're going to play football at Cornell, we're going to play football at First Street. And I walked those fields 100 times waiting for them to, shout out to me, this is the field you're supposed to be playing on. It never quite happened, but did a ton of research to that, and in October of 2017, I gave to the board the 20-year facilities vision, remembering the district was just coming off the failure of a bond issue, which would have brought in numerous pieces of the puzzle to the district, including an activities complex, and we know that there were numerous reasons why that bond issue failed. Number one, adding $1.92 to everyone's property taxes. Number two, that activities complex was a lightning rod issue because it was not seen as a priority by many people in the community, or not as high a priority as other items, but it was tacked on late in the game to that bond issue, and then there was some pretty strong opposition to it, and we totally understand and note that then when we ran the bond issue in 2018, we made sure that two things were true. Number one, that bond issue would be tax levy neutral, and number two, the activities complex would not be part of that, and we'd find another way to finance that project and get it in place if we thought we needed it. As much as I love a Friday night going to football games at the First Street Field, I would ask you one question the next time you go there for a game this upcoming fall. Where's the track? There's one. I'd also flash back to 2019 when we had a series of games where we played in serious storms, and we literally were housing players in the gazebo in the nearby park, or on school buses, or getting them to the high school as best we could. And that's the safety issue that I'm just not very comfortable with. We are looking at unifying our campus by adding the activities complex as the next big piece of the puzzle to give us that 8-lane track that we do not have, to give us a regulation-sized soccer field that we do not have, to give our marching band a more quality place to perform, which we do not have, especially on bad weather nights they do not perform. Obviously, to football, we would also then upgrade all of our track and field pieces, so shot put, discus, and truly trying to get to the level of what we see in other schools. But more importantly to me, it's all about having facilities that are commensurate to the talents and abilities of our kids. We did that with the Performing Arts Center. We have an outstanding performing arts, fine arts program, and we were able, through the support of the community, to build the Performing Arts Center, which has been the crown jewel for the district. We're looking to do the same thing with the activities complex. And we see it also as a benefit to the city. Pulling in events like major track meets, marching band competitions and everything is going to bring more people in the community. It's going to bring more people in spending money. And we also envision community events where you have access to the LBC, the tennis courts, the gymnasiums on our campus, the Performing Arts Center, and this activities complex. And we see that as a pretty powerful. We see this as becoming the new hub of the city in a lot of ways. So that's what we're looking for more than anything. And we know, too, we have a great relationship right now with Cornell, and we do spend some of our time playing football between Cornell and First Street. We did not play Cornell last year because of their construction going on. We're not going to play again in the fall of 2022 for the same reason. But ultimately, we went back to playing on both fields. There's a day that Cornell could have just stopped that partnership for whatever reason. They could think it's a liability thing, they may not want the hassle, and we don't want that because then that would leave us with just the First Street facility, and while there's a lot of charm to it, and we put a lot of money into it this past fall to make it as good as possible, it's not a facility you're going to be using 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, and that's what we truly need. So we ask you to give it your consideration. We're very grateful to the Planning and Zoning Commission for moving it forward a week and a half ago. We are clear, like Chris and I, Chris said that we talked before with regard to the lighting issue. We understand that the vote would be tabled for this evening. We at least want to have an our discussion tonight and have Laura be able to give you the information, and I'll be here to, as a sidekick, answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Council, for your commitment to the community and making it an exciting place to live. I will just touch on, I've been doing this for 20-some years, some of the common issues or complaints that folks will typically come up with when this sort of development happens. I talk a little bit on traffic, parking, stormwater, trails, aspect of not my backyard, lighting, and we'll open it up to questions. First on traffic and parking. As Chris mentioned, we'll be meeting later this week to talk about that some more. Late this afternoon, I forwarded an exhibit. I don't know if we can put it in the package or not. Apologize for the late information on that, but I can kind of talk to it. Right now, we did a parking lot expansion for Livermore School District a few years back, kind of using that as an example. That particular parking expansion was at Indian Creek Elementary School, which is 0.43 miles walking distance to their track and field facility. They use that for overflow parking for bigger attended games. So just kind of give you a comparison of what 0.43 miles equates to here. That would basically encompass all the way up Palisade Road at the Stonebrook entrance. It would encompass past that elementary school on the east side, that street there. That's on the east side of the elementary school. So we looked at the parking in a quarter-mile radius, not 0.45, but 0.25. Quarter-mile radius is about 570, 560 stalls roughly. If you were to encompass a third mile out, that would take you to the east side of the elementary school, a little bit further, but there are a few stalls that we could capitalize on. The point I want to make, though, is on the school grounds as it exists now, there would be there's roughly 600 stalls. That does account for some majority of the stalls at the LBC to be used by this facility. If we chose to, we could designate 10 stalls during a sporting event that maybe could only be used by LBC members. That can be sorted out. But the point is, there's roughly 600 stalls on the school grounds, and that is considered a fairly conservative number, assuming that there's no parking on the entrance and exit to high school, nor in that exhibit showed it. And I don't know if you can pull it up on the screen or not. But right now, we're seeing a lot of congestion is during events, reducing from the path. When you got people parking on one side of that access drive, exiting the school, or on that the Loop Street, in front of the high school, you get somebody parking there, you can't get out. So we do not account for any parking there. In fact, we recommend that there be no parking signs put there and hopefully controlled such that it's so people come to events, they know not to park there, because that's contributing to 80 to 90% of the issues that we have with circulation on the school campus is the fact that people parking, you can't have too much traffic because those lanes are not wide enough for it. So with nearly 600 spaces on the campus, and again, we try to be on the conservative side of that, having those areas no parking, that would equate to roughly 1,650 attendees to the game, or whatever event it might be. That does not account for any parking on public streets within Stonebrook or anything like that. So if you started factoring those in, that ratio would even, and that's assuming 3.5 people per stall. And so if you started factoring in, people walking to the game, that's something that we'll have to talk through. But I could see where we could designate certain routes in Stonebrook as our emergency access, those being signed, definitely no parking on one side so that you could still get vehicles by. Those streets are adequate width, unlike near the First Street building. If you have people parked on one side, it's even tighter there. So those are first state engineering design standards. The width of those streets would allow for parking on one side and two-way traffic to exist. But there are some, we could, at intersections and along, like I said, along the main access or exit or entrance out of Stonebrook to that emergency vehicle area, which is in the northwest of the field, that we could do some signage to help make sure that that access is as friendly as possible. Next is stormwater. Back in 2005, when the high school was constructed, there was a kind of overall master plan for the stormwater associated with that project. So that the current stormwater basin to the north and or mostly west of the high school, that was designed not necessarily to the design standards at that point in time. It was more designed for flood reduction, and we had downstream some of our neighbors had started constructing their homes at that point. Actually, a number of them were already in place by then. So that basin came online to help protect the threat of water backing up on those downstream properties. Within that report, it did account for so-called 10 acres of additional impervious area to be added to the Mount Vernon Schools campus, of which is designated as the area that we're talking about tonight for an upcoming school or activities complex. So it did account for that, but what, without getting too technical on it, it wasn't designed again to the current standards at the time, I should say. When we started looking at the stormwater management design on this, knowing that that would be a contentious item, and the school district turned our firm loose on that to look at that in detail about 6-8 months ago. And basically arrived at a solution where we had shown on the site plan is the 3 blue areas. The blue area immediately to the south west of the facility, that basin, or stormwater basin, is designed to meet the current standards for the impervious area that's added for this project. So we can confidently say that we meet today's standards, which do account for more of a flash flood type rainfall events that we see more commonly these days. In addition, we are planning to dredge out the current basin that's just west of the school. When we did a topographic survey of that basin, I don't have the exact figures you need in front of me, but it was roughly 24% or so less storage in it now than what it was designed at. We don't know if it was not graded properly or if it just maybe sediment or accumulation of silt over the years. So with this proposal, we would not only take that sediment out, but we would also deepen it to provide some additional storage for some flood protection. Another safety factor that was built into the design would be the berm or the dike on the downhill side where the current trail is. We would actually raise a portion of that, roughly a foot, because right now, I've been in the Stonebrook area, and over the last 13, 14 years that I've lived here, I believe that basin is overtopped 2 to 3 times. There's no well-defined spillways, but right now there is a slope, a slight depression that kind of keeps it on school campus property where we do have those big rain events. With this proposal, we would actually raise the berm that is facing towards the residents to the west and to the southwest, and have a very defined, like I say, very 1 foot versus a few inches defined stowaway. So that we're, if it, was big rain events, and if and when it does overtop, it's structurally goes away from the neighbors, potentially is a threat now. Kind of ties in with the concerns of the neighbors about being too close to their backyards, but we'll get into that in a second. I wanted to talk about Cornell land negotiation and how that all, kind of how that came about. We had some neighbors concerned about, we have a grandstand literally at the time 50 feet from the back property line. And so there was a request of flipping the field, or flipping the visitor bleachers so that the home bleachers would be looking in the sun and sort of thing. We did our research and it's not a good idea to do that. We've talked to some school districts that had it and they said absolutely not doing it if they were to do it over. So part of our way to alleviate some of those neighbor concerns is we approached Cornell and said, could we look at a collaboration where we would acquire a 50-foot sliver of property from you, and in return the school district would provide some stormwater management in the basins that the stormwater pond would be on school district property to help ease the that negotiation and get them on board. But nonetheless, resulted in a 50-foot option going forward, and we were able to shift the fields 50 feet further away from those neighbors. In return, the basins that are designed in that on that site plan would account for 3 to 4 acres additional impervious area on Cornell property at some point down from the neighborhood. Next is trails. Mount Vernon comprehensive trails plan shows a trail more or less in the general alignment that you see on the site plan there, connecting from emergency access in the northwest corner of the site down to the current trail that's going across the detention basin dike. We'll talk more on trail lighting here in a moment. When we talk lighting, another thing I often see in these sorts of projects is not in my backyard. I just want to iterate that this area has always been called the North Field area in master plans dating prior to the high school in 2005, prior to any of those Stonebrook, at the time Stonebrook 5th edition, that came online around 2009. So there's been plans in place well before those folks purchased the property. I know it's things they don't want to hear, but it's true. And the district has been working to, we've had a number of neighborhood meetings and listening, and one of the things that resulted in those meetings is really pushing or working with Cornell to get that field shifted to the west, or to the east. So, in addition, we have shown when we were able to shift the field 50 feet, we gained some space to the backside of those bleachers where we can put some berming and some landscaping to help soften. We do realize that the views at the back of those bleachers is not going to be ideal. And but with some berming and some landscaping, we think we can get it to be a manageable compromise for all parties. happened that resulted in not getting a plan to you in advance of this meeting. Musco had some, there are folks that are doing the lighting design and eventually lighting for the project, which just put a plug in for them. They do sports field lighting for all of the nation. So they're experts in this arena. They had some cybersecurity issues last week. He was about ready to send it out to me on Monday or Tuesday, and they, anyway, they were out of commission for the week. So apologize, and we'll get you some information on that. But I did want to just take the opportunity to just talk a little bit about this so that we can all kind of do our own research before we act on this at our next meeting. The current ordinance has language in there about the potential, trajectory of the light from the fixture of being greater than 27% from horizon downward. And we have the options to, we can come in right under, meaning we don't quite achieve that with an 80-foot pole. Now we can go with a 90-foot pole, but then to me it worsens what we're ultimately after, which is to reduce the, it's called candela readings. So like imagine if you're standing on if you have a property on the west side of the field, and you're looking across the field and you see the two poles across the field. By raising the poles, it actually makes the glare stronger, but it meets your code because you're able to turn the fixtures down to meet that 27%. So right now we have with the 80-foot poles, I believe we have 25 degrees versus a 90-foot pole or at 28.1. But we could share with Chris and the city engineer and then distribute it to you guys, the exhibits, once we get with the new readings, comparing the 80 to the 90-foot poles, and we can all make an informed decision together. But you're going to find that the comparison between the 80 and 90-foot poles is virtually equivalent when it comes to foot candles at the property line, which right now the readings are 0.01, regardless of the 80-foot pole or 90-foot pole. It's the candela readings, which is the glare component that with the 80-foot pole, I mentioned earlier, the properties on the west side are going to be, it's going to be a little less glare. However, the north properties are going to be a little higher with an 80-foot pole. But then you go to 90, it's kind of reversed. So it's basically a wash regarding the component. I believe that's all. I mentioned the trail lighting. At the P&Z meeting, there was a request. I had some P&Z members to consider adding trail lighting along the west side of this facility on down to the high school parking lot. I do know there are some concerns with the properties about, that trail in some locations is roughly 5 to 10 feet off the back property line. And so if we're to put lights similar to either what is at Nature Park or the ones that are recently installed in front of LBC there, there could be some concern with the neighbors on that. I don't know if this, just throw a proposal out there, if collaborate with Chris on this, is there a scenario where the school district would be responsible for trail paving and the city would collaborate with the partner and do the lighting part of it? It is part of the trails comp plan, and this does result in a community improvement by having it more walkable. So just wanted to throw that out, something to explore. With that, I turn it over to you guys for questions.
Hi, Lauren. Hey, this is Deb Herman. Do you know what height those poles are up at the existing field, just as a frame of reference?
I do not.
Just curious. I think they upgraded either the lighting or the poles or both through one of the cycles of improvements. And, you know, being the resident who lives the closest to the existing field, it did cause some additional light spill, but it wasn't horrible. But my property's far enough away. I just was trying to get a frame of reference.
Sure. Just, if you guys are familiar with Vernon Community High School track and field facility in Van Horn, this would be similar setup as far as your separation from the grandstands to those neighbors to the west of that facility.
Lauren, I'm Craig Engel, nice to meet you. Thanks for being here and for giving us a summary. Appreciate that. With the lighting, a couple of questions here. Is it possible just to put the poles only for the field lighting, only on the west side, shining down to the east? Because the east side, it's school property. There's no houses really for quite a distance there.
Sure. The folks at Moscow could answer this much more.
Because they do it in Kinnick all the time. They only have one side has Musco lights there and then none on the other side.
So I think it comes down to when you do certain classifications for like high school regulation, you have to have certain light levels and max and min thresholds have to be within a certain range. So what you have issue with in that case is when you get to the opposite side of the field, you really have to crank up the lights on the west side to get that max and min, because you can't have 100-foot candles on this sideline and 50 on the other, because your ratio is too great, even though it's clearly bright enough. It's just so.
Well, just check into it. I think it's something to do because I seem to recall the hundreds of times I've been at Kinnick Stadium, the few times they have night games, they only have the Musco lights on one side. They don't have it on the other side. I could be wrong, so I think it's something to check out. You were talking about foot candles. What are those? I'm sorry, maybe maybe that's planning and zoning. We've already asked through this, but
Lauren, can I try to give a layman's? A foot candle is the amount of light that is emitted for a certain distance to provide a given brightness. So on the field, and I have a little bit of experience with this, having boys that played football, and having played football at some fields that didn't have the right foot candle lighting.
Called a few games.
Yeah. So it's really the measure that allows you to have safe vision in a night event.
Just to kind of simplify the conversation around lighting too, is understanding how much better lighting is at sports facilities now compared to, let's say, the First Street field and the uber old style of lighting versus the lighting that you now see at such complexes that points downward and really eliminate a lot of the light bleed for the neighborhood that you would have seen in the past. You were putting this, 40 years ago.
The ability with these newer lights to use directionally are amazing. And you see it not only in facilities like this, you see it in certain street lighting, parking, you see it at airports, those types of things. Because, let's face it, along with everything else, we want to reduce pollution, and light pollution is a concern. So I do think that there are some opportunities there that weren't there even 5 years ago.
And just to give you a little kind of reference here, on the field itself, the foot candles range from 40 as the minimum to
So that, just for clarification, so that demonstrates to me that the focus of the lighting is directly on the field with little overspill outside of that.
It also gives us the ability to turn down the lights to dark when Solon has the wall.
It's funny you mentioned that, because my youngest son scored a touchdown down in Washington in a dark end zone, and then scored the extra point in a light end zone during the same quarter. I don't know of anyone who has ever scored a touchdown and an extra point in two different end zones in the same quarter. It was quite bizarre, but it's, yeah.
And to that end, something that, again, the planning and zoning and the community school district can get into the fine details with this, and we can bless it or not, but how many of the contests that you're thinking of holding on this field, how many are going to be played at night with lights? Is it going to be 10%? Is it going to be 15%? Because that may be helpful for the neighbors, the NIMBY question as well. Really, the big issues with parking will be 5 games a year. It's not going to be when we have soccer necessarily or track meet, but when we have, or when we play Solon.
So there'll be more events there than you think but it also will be dark from literally November, December, January, February, and a good share of March. So almost half the year it's going to be largely dark.
And there are athletic events in those months other than football that will be played outside?
No, literally you pick up again with soccer and track in the latter part of March, early April. So you would not be seeing tons and tons of events there. And I agree with the traffic. And no matter where, if I go to Solon, I park in the Catholic Church parking lot. If I go to CPU, I park in the field. If I go to Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska, or King Stadium in Iowa City, I'm gonna walk. If I'm going to Carver Hawkeye Arena to watch my great Blue Jays blast the Iowa Hawkeye win, I'm gonna walk.
Okay, great. Well, I agree with you, but my question is this. You have more outlets usually in those places. So I just want to tell you guys, I'm so glad you're here, Lauren, because this has been really helpful. You've answered some of my questions already. And I, no doubt, believe we need to improve our facilities. I was a multi-sport athlete myself. I understand the importance of families and kids and community members being proud of it. I want to be proud of it, but I just don't want to have any regrets. And I just want to make sure, and I'm just glad that Chris said at the beginning of the meeting that we're going to wait a little bit, because I really want to have things ironed out with the outcome of what we're going to do with traffic and access. I'm concerned about, if someone in Stonebrook has a medical emergency, when there's lines of vehicles, how are fire and ambulance crews going to get in there? I mean, if people are parking, I drove through it today, if people are parked in Stonebrook in two directions, you can't get another car in there, let alone an ambulance. I understand you've got some plans made about what you're going to do with signage and that kind of thing, but I think I would feel better to see that stuff documented so that I can feel better that those things are covered. And for me, you mentioned the safety issue, Greg, about the gazebo and the other places. For me, that's what it comes down to here. And whether we were talking about expanding First Street or doing something else with Cornell or this field, I'd be asking the same questions.
Yeah, and regrettably, it's an issue when we play at First Street, it's an issue when we play at Cornell, and it's going to be somewhat of an issue here.
Yes.
But I think there are solutions that we can work on the flow to, and I've been a proponent of largely making the streets in Stonebrook no parking on event nights, and I've gotten some people that want me to rethink my thinking on that, but I think minimally 13, I think from the entrance to Stonebrook to where you turn right on 10th and then it turns into 13th and then out the north side I think minimally that stretch needs to be no parking. So to do exactly what you're saying.
I just was going to remind us all that, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago now, we had a fire on a street during a football Friday. We have lessons learned from what happened in my neighborhood, where someone lost their home, and thankfully no one lost their life. I would hate for that not to be a lesson learned that we take forward into this plan as well. And I want to say, as a very long time resident who is so excited to finally see this plan be acceptable and potentially probable, it is thrilling that we're at this juncture. So let's be thoughtful how we move forward, and let's figure out how to make it happen, not why we shouldn't do it, because this is a long time coming. Our kids need this, our community needs this. My children wanted this, and they couldn't have it. They want their children to have it.
You got my detail earlier too about in the 20-year facilities vision, I do envision in the next 8 to 10 years that a fourth instructional building will need to be built in the campus as we continue to grow. We envision that would be probably a 4 or 5 building, which helps us academically move the 5th graders out of a middle school setting and into more of an intermediate and elementary setting. That likely would be where the current football field and track is to the south of the elementary school, which then obviously then takes the track away, and now we're just running in the street. So that's one of the larger, and I think one of the charms of our district is everything on one campus. And I really want to keep that way as opposed to buying an off campus, either build a football field or build a sport building. That's piece, and also too, did not talk about the financing. We are looking at a combination of private fundraising and use of facilities money, borrowing against our federal money. And we to date have raised over $2 million, and we're going to take some next steps with that campaign here in the next couple of months to engage even more people. And also, we're feeling good about, this is going to be something that we're not going to be taxpayers for, and we're not going to have to raise, property taxes or anything to accomplish. And that really goes back all the way to when I first got here. It's one of the first meetings I went to was in the summer of 2017, when a group of people who believed in this project really wanted to get it going and started looking at the possibility of doing it as a private fundraising thing. We learned after a year and a half or so that we could probably get it all done that way, but found a mechanism to do it with a combination of facilities money and private fundraising, while not jeopardizing our ability to do the yearly maintenance and other types of emergency things we need to do with our facilities money. We still have that.
To Deb's point, I think she's right about it. Let's try to figure out a way. I don't know if you guys have already talked with Doug, but again, I would feel better to know that, what's it going to involve for our police force to make sure that Stonebrook no parking is enforced and traffic is running smoothly. Again, from my perspective, I have to think about everyone in the community, and I have to think about if the police force is taking away on big events to do that, where does that leave us otherwise?
And the district needs to have a lot of skin in their game.
Yeah.
And from a budget standpoint, if we need extra officers on Friday nights, then that's something that we have to consider.
Yeah.
And again, I would echo Deb's and steps, but finding ways to do it, but doing it right.
I'd like to just, in the spirit of how we get this done and not why we don't do it, I do want to bring us back to the point that, we're talking about really for major events, it's the football season. And that's 4 or 5 games a year. And managing those, I can see with a regulation track, which, has been a dream in Mount Vernon for, I think as long as I've been here.
Yes.
Maybe a few nights there, but a lot of times those are weekend meets when you have the major events. And I think in the big picture, if we say that there's 10 nights a week, a year, thank you, not a year, because that was a really bad math, and you can all tell I didn't graduate from Mount Vernon. But, you know, to keep that in perspective as well. You know, because sometimes we make things bigger than they are. And you know, having gone through all the pain, and Tom knows this, and everything, when I was on council and when I was on mayor, and Lauren, let me tell you that it is a pleasure for me to have you standing there as, you know, a part of this project rather than just a resident of Stone Brook. Because you've been through it with us as well. You know, the drainage swale basin, Doug's got experience with this. You know, this is really, when I look at this plan, a well thought out plan, and I believe everyone's asking really excellent questions. And we're moving in the right direction. The one thing that I looked at, and again, this comes from when we were building the high school, is when we think about the traffic pattern and parking, entrance and exit to the north of the middle school building to, I believe it's 7th Avenue, and whether there's any opportunity to perhaps add parking and perhaps add, not something that's used every day, but when there's events, there's an outlet there for parking, inlet and outlet.
I think the meeting on Wednesday is going to go from the macro level to the micro level. So we're looking at not only traffic circulation during school, because what we really have as it relates to circulation in the general vicinity right now are two time frames where traffic becomes an issue, when school is in session and when school is out of session. And then there's particular times throughout the year that will become more problematic than not. And we've had traffic backed up onto Highway 30 or Business 30 now to the roundabout. So we're going to look at that because we're talking about the potential to add for you know, another elementary and how all that gets dumped on various street networks. But I don't think that any of the conversation on Wednesday is going to be a roadblock per se. We've made First Street work. We've made Cornell Games work. We're going to make this work. It's a matter of identifying the corridors. So going back to earlier comments, yes, we will probably, like we do with Cornell Games, we will probably on event nights post no parking on 10th and then the portion 13th that comes down to the back entrance in there. That will be our emergency route. They have full access of the complex, but all of these items are going to be discussed just so from, you know, police and fire and ambulance will all be represented there on Wednesday as well, just to have a, you know, more of a tabletop exercise on how we're going to make this work. And as, you know, Greg alluded to, they're going to have skin in this game, and we're going to point out that you need to do this, and thankfully, you know, Mr. Tatey will not have to stand out there in the middle of winter, typically, versus, you know, late fall. But there are going to be traffic generations, and if we do have to go the route of additional police services, typically we work out a deal between the two entities. And I think over the course of the last 5 years, we've shown that we can play nice together and get along. We've done that with the LBC and tennis courts and trails and everything else. So
I think it's also an opportunity for reserve officers. I mean, they get a lot of experience in you know, dealing with the public. You know, I remember watching some young people have experiences, and a lot of times that's their first experience with somebody in a uniform. And I have to say, the majority of those experiences were positive because of the way the officers handled it. And you know, I'm excited about this. glad that everybody's at the table and that we're continuing to, refine it to where we're able to have that program. I look forward to, being at the first game.
One point that I hope is part of the agenda for Wednesday is parking at the LEC. In the report from Matt today, there was a tournament coming up on Friday, the 25th. And so, I know that most football games are going to be Fridays, but, the moment you get a big track meet, the moment you get a marching band event where you've got, hundreds of kids and the associated parents traveling in, I don't want that to, right now we have a rule in place where the entire facility can only be rented out, I think 1 day or weekend or something like that, right? So I just want to keep that as part of the conversation to make sure that we don't start infringing on those users' ability to do what they want to do as well. So.
Now, in utilizing the 95 that they did in the traffic count, that's really why I didn't send that out so late. We wouldn't have had time to explain it all. We've been cognizant on both sides. So we've had some large-scale basketball tournaments that have utilized school parking, and they've had events where they've utilized some of our parking. We knew that going into that.
Absolutely.
And
That's
we
part of the
kind of
conversation.
identified that. But yeah, it's a schedule, and the communication communication is key to anything, but that channel has to stay open. And so far, knock on wood, we've been doing a fairly good job of that. So you're adding one more component to the mix.
To Greg's point about walking, I'm sure that, in through Stonebrook, there probably will be more walking traffic. And we talked about the trail lighting more. I'm wondering can they be lit from the ground or having short ballasts so where the trails are still lit, but not, infringing on the property owners that are there too much?
There's some alternatives to like the current lighting style. It's either found at Nature Park or in front of LBC, and that would be like the bollard lighting, which would be maybe waist high, and then they would cast down.
Yeah.
The only issue about those are more suited for like in front of like entry plazas to buildings and that sort of thing, where you're lighting a little smaller
We
space.
have 2 of them in front of the Hertz building, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so if you can imagine, if we wanted to get that trail lit to any certain, security level, we would need to have a lot of them.
Okay.
Now, it can be done.
Okay.
But again, there are poles that are, the new poles that have been put in on those newer trail segments here in the last few years, they are, as far as downcast, they do a fine job. It's just where you have an issue where you have some of the homes that are going to sitting below, like where that the berm or the detention basin is, they're going to be sitting above, and so you're going to, in those cases, those make see some glare.
Just to give you some idea, we put lights on timers, and then we've added basically shade structures to certain sides, so it wouldn't be quite as far. But after the initial opening of the existing trail that goes to from the LBC to the school and back into Palisades, after we made those adjustments, we haven't heard any complaints since, but learning some lessons from there. I would agree, the ground mounted sign lights that we had discussed previously, to get to the number of them that we need in order to light the pathway, it ends up being not cost effective because you can get away with maybe 2 or 3 of the larger lights as long as you do the angles of shading correctly.
Maybe this is the place for Matt's glow rock.
Think about the same thing.
That's exactly what I was saying.
As long as the school's paying for it.
And it was real experimental last time I did it. I think somebody has to have done it by now.
As long as they're in the snow.
See, I think we can get there. I think we just need to make sure that, the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yeah, like I said, there's nothing earth-shattering from any of the information The recommendation to table is simply to allow us to get to Wednesday and have more time to look at the lighting plan. We're talking about 2 weeks' time, so I don't think it's going to negatively affect their schedule per se.
Going 2 weeks or going in a month?
I'm gonna go with 2 weeks. They can always retable in a month if they'd like, but I would say 2 weeks. Unless something comes forward that, we need to spend a lot more time on, which we would just recommend that to leave the table instead of calling you off at the next meeting.
One last, not to get too deep into it, do we need to do a variance for the lighting? I mean, just because it is already in ordinance?
Or do we need to revise it?
Or do we need, I mean,
So the question, and that's kind of why we want more time to look at it. Depending on the degree of variance, yeah, there is potential there. But if our lighting code needs to be revamped, it's been 8 to 10 years since that was originally looked at.
I don't know how much research Truman did, but in the notes that I read, he had commented 5 to 6 years. But I just wasn't sure how accurate that was.
I've been here 6 and it hasn't been touched since I've been here, so
Okay,
it's older than that.
okay. I guess we're-
just thinking time frame, is that,
Yes, again, of all of the things that I hear when they say, can the city do this, can the city do that, can you look at the lighting and can you look at the stormwater? They're not necessarily concerned with the location, they're not necessarily concerned with the use, it's can you look at those 2 items. So, and then traffic circulation has been, been chirped in my ear since I walked through the door, so.
Just asking the question, because I don't know what's been considered or asked. Have we talked to Cornell about having a route from the north parking lot?
So I'm not going to elaborate that until after Wednesday.
Okay. Again, driving by there today, I'm just like, there's Smith Hall.
Yeah.
That was actually on the table in 2004.
I will tell you
Never
we're
had
discussing.
to go to school, so.
I will tell you that it will be discussed.
That's great, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
With that, I'd
Ask
like
for
to motion to table.
I will second.
All set? We need to vote on this motion to table, at least to the next meeting at this point. All in favor of that motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item J6, special consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Request for proposals for a new city website. Council action is needed.
So this is our first flush in the RFP. Please keep in mind that my staff and I do not write the websites very often, so we borrowed and begged from other communities that have recently gone through this as well. Looking for input if there's anything in here that you think that we're missing. The gist of why we're at this point, obviously, is our website is old, it's cumbersome, it is easy to use in some regards and difficult to use in others, and I think the goal from the very start, from the time that I walked through the door, is to try and modernize ourselves. We waited until the LBC revamped their website so that we could take bits and pieces of that, and there's some cohesiveness between the two. But ultimately, we would like to move to a situation where people can fill out requests for action online, we're able to track them online. Just trying to make it a little bit user friendly. We do put a lot of information on the website. Meredith does a pretty good job of trying not to get it too cluttered, but at this time, things linger and before you take them off. So, yeah, I think with that,
So is
So-
de novo going to be considered?
what's that?
Is de novo being considered? Since they're obviously.
The answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
We would
Yeah,
put
as long as, I mean,
I think,
obviously they've got to see.
yeah, I think they have, to a certain extent, they have a leg up just because they're already in town and they have the existing website. However, there were 3 good entities that even looked at the marketing of the LBC at the time.
Yeah.
I think the platforms are fairly similar. The only question is where do we host our domain and some things like that. But it's been long enough that I thought we would put this out as an RFP. Technically speaking, they're a service industry, so we wouldn't necessarily have to go through this process if we didn't want to. But I kind of wanted to throw, we do have a couple of local individuals that work on websites as well.
Yeah.
Give them an opportunity to take a look and see what they can use.
That's good. I think this is the right approach. I just wanted to know.
So,
Yeah, they'll definitely get the RFP sent to them direct.
Okay.
so when I read through here, Chris, and maybe I just missed it, but I think one of the things we could really take advantage of is the integration between the website and all the angles of social media, rather than just having people do social media by themselves. You can consolidate and integrate those things together. Now, I didn't see that called out in here necessarily.
There's really nothing about social media. It's just specific to website, unless I'm.
Yeah, I don't think there was. I think that at least hinting to it in the RFP.
I think we're really missing the bill if we don't specifically call it out.
So I will add that under project goals, and
Mhm.
basically the integration of social media, city social media, something to that effect.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
Good.
And then is the city still going to take the responsibility for the content? So we have an administrative role, a content role, but then we have to have a servicer role, the person who takes care of the shell, right? So are we looking for the person to take care of the shell, and the city takes care of the content? And am I making sense?
Yes, so the current plan, I mean, that's how we operate today.
Ken?
I think it kind of depends on the complexity. I would definitely like the ability, especially if we integrate social media, to be able to do that internally, because, you know, we send out a tweet daily.
Yes.
And we do a number of other things that I would love to keep in-house. My perspective, the one question I'm going to have for any organization that looks to respond to this RFP is I want to make sure that it's something that my staff is able to pick up on with, you know, an okay amount of training. I'm not expecting an exorbitant amount of training, because they never do that, but I want to have the same ability that we do today, so that in an emergency situation, I can call one of my staff members and I don't have to rely on my group to get that website updated. So, but full-scale changes or integrations, you know, I would keep them on as a consulting basis, kind of like, hey, we've got all of this information coming, let's just say regarding COVID, we need to make sure that it's a cohesive message. I would be able to, have the ability to go back to that company and say, we need help with this. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes
Total
sense. Yep. So, do we have the person already lined up to provide the overall security architecture for this website, or is that part of this RFP as well?
That will be part of this RFP.
You need to
Similar to-
specifically call it out.
I think it's to provide administrative functionality for multiple users to update the website securely.
That doesn't say security to me.
Security functionality, next bullet.
It's the security of the site itself.
Yeah, isn't it covered?
Yeah,
in
I
the
just-
bullet?
I don't have any problem adding another bullet and saying
Yeah.
security, because we're still gonna come back and say security is an issue for you, correct? Yes.
Well,
So-
my concern is if we go to the pay online thing, you want to make sure that people's data is secure, much more than you secure it today. The security of that website needs to be up to speed, because we're taking care of people's data, right? That's what I'm getting at.
It's really, I think cybersecurity is
Yeah.
what
Paramount.
the level we're talking about.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so it does say here, consider the feasibility of including a billable service option. So if we really want them to include that as an option, we need to state that for sure.
Provide a secure.
But then it
method
says
for
provide a secure method for online bill payment. like that, I think it's,
I think it goes beyond just,
you're talking about the data itself, right?
I am talking about IT words.
Yes, yes.
You know, to Deb's point and Steph's and so on the selection process, maybe a bullet in there that emphasizes security. The selection team will recommend a professional vendor to Mount Vernon City Council. The following criteria: technical expertise, design portfolio, user experience with local government, and a strong emphasis on cybersecurity or something to that effect.
Data integrity.
Yeah,
And data protection is what it's called, data protection.
good. Because then, you know, they're going to include some verbiage in that RFP. They'll go into that process. So.
Yeah. Yep.
The
Those
only
are the
add-
big things that came up with me.
and only one for me under the project timeline, which is on that last page as well. Is there a need to have an anticipated project conclusion date?
So normally we will do the project conclusion date when we sign the contract with the actual company.
Well, if I were the company bidding on this and you came to me after you said, Craig, you guys got it, you have to have it in 3 months, and in my mind I was thinking I would take 7. I'm like, oh, whoa. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you thought it was going to be 3 months. I'm not making this up.
Sure.
Part of that will be, I mean, building a website is if somebody handed me the content, I can build a site in an hour and a half. I mean, honestly, it's really not that difficult. But then you look at considering the feasibility of including a billable services option, that's an entirely different ball of wax, right?
That's right.
So, to your point, I see exactly what you're saying. I think putting anything on there is a crapshoot at best, depending on what we end up with.
I would anticipate the question then from, because
Yeah,
usually when the RFP goes out, it'll say, you've got a week to ask questions about the RFP itself. That's going to be one of the questions. What do you want to say?
Typically, yes. And so I would say this, my expectation is 9 to 12 months, tops. Okay? I want this up and running in a year.
There you go.
So when they ask me that question, that will be my answer to that. Now, if they can do it faster, great, but for me, I want it to be user-friendly. I do not want to put an unrealistic expectation on them as far as getting something out the door. And I want to make sure that my staff is fully integrated in it before they walk out the door. So I don't want them to spend 8 months designing and building a website. If I give them 9 months, then that last month is, turning it into a turnkey operation, and everybody's kind of rushed to dump that a little bit, in other facilities. So the reason for me not doing that is, and I've had what you've asked. I've had companies ask me specifically, well, what's your expectation? And my expectation is this.
Good.
The next community-wide project that we're going to have is going to affect every person that lives in Mount Vernon after the garbage recycling bin thing is water meters, supposedly. It'd be nice to be able to offer the full gamut of services on the water meter, the installation, but also better, more practical billing options. And we're kind of talking about that line here, but to get away from, people bringing the checks to City Hall, just to get out of that system. People, donate to churches on the website. They don't, So let's package that, and make that whole process more user-friendly and hopefully more acceptable to the population.
Not to go too far down the road on that, but would there be something preventing us from giving individuals the ability to see their water usage? I mean, now we've got different databases talking to each other, and that's another whole separate thing.
I think so.
Separate portal, you're talking.
Well, if I can log in and pay my water bill, why can't I also log in?
So I think two different operating systems. The only thing I would say, it depends on who we choose to go forward with from that perspective, because they each bring a different operating system to it. It all goes back to our financial software. Now, I will tell you that we have one of the more basic models of our financial software that's available. So there's always potential, for us.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Yeah,
on-
if you're willing to write a big enough check, you can get anything.
For
you're
sure.
talking about. Yeah.
But, yeah, so, grand scheme of things, if we go and get the best version that we can for the water meter project, that would be the AMI system that could take reads every 15 seconds if we chose to do that. There's a lot of capabilities that I think we have potentially at our disposal, but we haven't scratched that surface quite yet.
I can't tell you how pleased I am to see this.
I will let Laura know, because she did the line share the work.
Being able
Yeah.
to know with how to package it. With a couple tweaks, are you looking for a motion to move forward on this
Yes,
RFP? Okay.
and I have the changes that I've noted.
You got that?
I provide a motion then that we consider this RFP proposal, approve the consideration of this RFP proposal.
Correct. Moved and seconded. Any further questions on this RFP for the new website? And we'll go to voting for it. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're off to reports. Lisbon, Vernon Police Report. I think we got that from Mr. Chief Shannon. Anything to highlight, Chief?
Nothing additional other than what's in the report if you have questions.
Before we move off of Chiefs, you're too humble to say it, but earlier, I think the cooperation that we saw demonstrated earlier between the police and fire and public works starts with you three. Well, it starts with Chris, but then funnels down to you three. And you weren't listed, but thank you. I mean, it was.
We have good people we're working with, that's right.
Yeah, well, it's true though, and it shows. Yeah. Well, it shows when, to Chief's point, you train for certain things, and that wasn't necessarily one of them, and yet everybody's able to pull the trigger and do what needed to be done, and that starts at the top, so, yeah.
And
We're blessed here.
I didn't want to speak. I was one of those at the state tournament when that call came through, and I knew of it because my wife was on the fire department, and her phone went off in the middle of the wrestling tournament stuff. 90% of those, and I don't know the actual statistic, but I'm guessing at least 90% of those don't go the right way.
Yeah.
The worst calls that we ever see come through are ag-related calls. Typically, the time frame that occurs between our response or being found is never a good situation. Having the victim here, but we have great people. From the derecho to COVID to this incident, it's been seamless and makes me look good a lot of times. But really, it's everybody knowing what they have to do and doing it when they need to. And what do they say? You get too much credit when things are good, and not enough credit when things are bad. In the last 5 years, it's been a good run, and this was just kind of a testament to that. I wasn't even in town, and things went off as smoothly as they could, and nobody questioned what needed to be done. So,
Thank you.
all.
Thank you.
Public Works Report, so the report from Eldon. Can't believe spring leaf pickup and brush pickup.
I know, right?
Coming up pretty soon.
I actually got my mower today.
I don't know that I'm happy to say it, but
I sucked up leaves with my mower today.
Any questions at Eldon on Public Works? And I think today we also got from Matt Savage, Parks and Rec report. Anything to add?
Oh, we did get one? I love you, man.
always the meeting I
Thank you all.
And then for information, join the Clintstock Town Hall meeting this Saturday at 6:30?
6 to 7:30
Okay, good. There it is.
is what he has said.
How do we frame that? How do we advertise that, or is that our responsibility? responsibility?
It's not our responsibility to advertise. So he is hosting a town hall meeting. I think he's, in his own words, people are asking to at least have time with him to discuss the pipeline situation and a few other items. It's not a political event. This is, like I said, he's a sitting representative and he's having a town hall session. So all are welcome to attend. The mayor asked if I would be attending. The answer is no. I choose to have those conversations with Mr. McClintock outside of a town center. The questions that I ask tend to be more focused than the town hall meeting and probably a little bit more in depth into city government versus what's going to probably be discussed on Saturday.
I was going to attend, hopefully have talked better about accessing some meeting space here and just say welcome and floor is yours. So that's as far as the agenda. But also pipelines and other issues.
I'll be here just to assist with technology
Okay.
stuff from that standpoint.
So I'll work with that for 6 o'clock. Reports, mayor, council, committee reports. Anything from Chris's?
Question, Chris, we're at 3.5 months prior to July 1. What's our calendar look like for informing our public about the garbage changeover?
So the first letter went out. People should be getting it here fairly soon. That,
Did you just get it?
I got it, yeah, I got it this week. It's
Okay,
the initial letter will ask you what toter size that you are looking at.
okay, great.
So there will be an introductory letter that will give you the sizes of the containers and then kind of the options with the prices.
Okay,
Once you choose a toter size, then Republic is working on a brochure that will be handed out at the same time the carts are. So this is kind of the first important step. If you do not respond, it does not mean you're not getting a toter. If you do not respond, you're going to get a 65-gallon solid waste container and a 65-gallon recycling container. If you want the 35-gallon every 2 weeks or the 96-gallon solid waste container, you need to fill out that form and get it back to City Hall. You can drop it in the mailbox, bring it into City Hall, mail it back to us, however you see fit. But that is the only kind of important piece of information. They'll get the toters ordered, and like I said, in the meantime, they're working on the material. So they'll start talking about what to put in recycling containers, so on and so forth. The brochure is a nice, well put together. It is tied specifically to the community, so they tailor fit the brochure to the community. I've actually had the opportunity to see Republic in a couple different states now.
good. I just didn't see the communication yet.
Yeah, so you'll get the letter, and then shortly thereafter, I think you're going to get the newsletter.
Okay,
So you get, there'll be words in each one.
great.
Discuss point, the third step in that process, besides the two that Chris has mentioned, is I still plan on doing a Saturday morning after step 1 is happening, step 2 is happening, a 9 to 12 at City Hall, and if nobody comes, that's great. But to have that opportunity for anything that may have been missed in 1 and 2, whatever. See what happens there.
I will tell people the 65-gallon is what I would consider normal. The 96 is really big. And then the 35, like I said, for the individual that has a bag of garbage a week would probably be sufficient. So look at the dimensions. If you want to stop in the City Hall and see the containers themselves. They do not have the 35 because they're a special order.
But a standard, like our standards are 40 gallon, right? Like that's.
So most of the standard containers are 30 gallons.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
30,
really? Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right.
To give you an idea, you're getting like, probably from a capacity standpoint, probably 2.5 garbage cans, give or take, in a 65. The 96, like I said, you could fit 2 or 3 of you inside of it. It's big. So those that, would fill, if you fill that on a weekly basis, I feel really sorry for you.
You're a big fan.
If you do,
If you order that one, you're going on the list, let's just be honest.
it's a pretty cumbersome, I mean, it's not cumbersome in the fact that, most people will be able to maneuver it, but the 65 and 35 will be easy much easier to maneuver and then sit outside. So,
Three meetings on Wednesday that I know about is with the Cornell School District in the morning, 1 o'clock on some personnel items, and Wayfair is 6:30.
That sounds right, the Wayfair meeting.
This Wednesday night. So there's 3 board meetings I think this Wednesday.
So I have that on my calendar, but I didn't know the time and place for that.
I've got on my calendar 5:30.
correct.
Yeah, so I think it's today's day.
Now, if we're planning on attending, we're gonna post an agenda or something, or is this?
So, no, because there's not an open discussion amongst yourselves. I would encourage you, if all of you do attend, not to sit next to each other and have.
And whisper in the back the whole thing.
Sorry.
This is the kickoff to the signage wayfinding. Yeah, this definitely will not be the only meeting, so please don't feel bad if you're not able to attend. It's just to kind of kick off.
Wednesday, what time?
5:30.
We're at here.
We kind of kicked it back and forth between here and City Hall. We just have more room here.
Thank you.
One of the other reports, for the mayor's report, I want to add 2 things. I was invited to, I spoke to the middle school and 2 7th graders that as a social studies project, they had to send a letter to elected officials about something. And so I went there, both items were addressed were sustainability, composting, and recycling. So that's where we're coming from. And the very last thing I was going to mention is that I was asked by Lions Club to do a welcome at their district convention that was hosted at the high school on Saturday. So I did welcome us all out in the parking lot after the event, and a woman comes up to me and says, "You're the mayor of Mount Vernon. Thanks for that Jake, who does such a great job of educating." She's a Mechanicsville EMT instructor, volunteer. And she said, she didn't even know Jake's last name, and said, "You're lucky to have him on your EMT force." So this out of the blue, as I get into my vehicle, this woman comes up to me and says, "To Jake." So that's my final note here. Thank you all. Thank this lady who, well, it's a big enough deal to reach out to me and say thanks for what you've done. So now I think we are officially adjourned. Thank you very much.